Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for God's Truth in Today's World. My name is Gwen. I'm one of the co-hosts here, and I have my other co-host, Mel. I'm so excited that we are able to come in tonight, and we are talking about self-control. So the question for today is, how do we view self-control in a godly way with this culture? So we have a lot of ideas and values and all of these things going on in this world today. And I feel like our values, our godly values, can kind of be drowned out sometimes. And we don't even realize that we're accepting some things of this world that are not necessarily godly. And so self-control is one of those things that I feel like sometimes we get lost in the shuffle because we're doing our daily lives and we're working and we have our kids and we have all these things pulling at us, and sometimes if we don't really sit down to talk about it and we don't view it and look at it, it's easy to lose that, and it's easy to just fly off the handle, lose our temper because this world kind of almost values that. They say, hey, it's okay to like speak your mind and talk and things like that. So it's interesting that we're talking about this tonight. And I know Mel was kind of saying some similar things before we got on the show. Tell me about that, Mel.
Yes. So I don't, I have noticed a huge, I get frustrated because I feel like, especially if you view shows now versus like TV shows and books even now versus like several decades ago, I just feel like there has been this big shift in what our culture values for just what they value basically. So like a big example I want to give is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So that's a pretty old book by this point. And the children in the book, like Susan is like Susan the Gentle. Like she's valued for her gentle and nature and her compassionate nature. And I feel like if you look at the things that were valued for those children and their character in that book versus if you were to pick a contemporary book off a shelf where there might be a kid that they're trying to do the right thing, but their parents tell them no, but they're going to go against their parents because they just got to do the right thing. And it's just like, it's so confusing. And I just feel like, what in the world is going on? Like when I feel like our culture, especially with TV shows, just it's not heroic or honorable or even something to be admired to have self-control. It's really just, wow, like go live your best life now and make these choices and who cares who gets hurt in the process and that guy just cut you off, tell him how you feel, you go, you stand up for yourself. Like I think especially when you look at God's word, that's not what he instructs us to do at all. And I also think it's part of the reason why people are so angry now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We have a culture that, like you said, we're supposed to stand up for ourselves and be bold and talk and like take over and say, this is how I feel, so you need to deal with it.
Own your truth. Like
Yes, yes. And it's, what is own your truth, really? I
I
mean, it's
don't
like,
even.
but it's something that while there are times when people need to speak up, and there are times when we don't want to be a floor mat and let other people walk all over us, there's also such a culture of speak your truth and stand up for yourself and all of these things that I feel like we just have gone way overboard on that.
Yep.
So we're not like you were saying, we're not teaching our children through shows and media and books and all these things that they need to have self-control and just like stop for a second. Okay, let's assess the situation before we just plunge in with our feelings, with everything that has happened and whatever else that they need to say or do during that situation. Let's take a step back and assess things and take a moment to control yourself and figure out what is the best plan here. And there are traits about people that we're overlooking if we just tell them like way to go for like speaking your mind all the time. Our children are going to gravitate towards that. They're going to say speaking my mind gets me good attention, and the everybody says this is an honorable great thing to do, which in some cases some people need to do that more, like I've said, but to do it, to not have a middle ground, that's, I feel like that's where we need to find a middle ground. Our society says do it all the time, constantly be in a place where we can jump in and say how we feel and it's a good thing. And then there's also a place where we can be like not saying anything ever at all and letting people walk all over us. So we're trying to find that middle ground. And I think that's what we're kind of talking about today.
Right. And I would say we even touched on some of that in like our previous episodes with boundaries and things like that. So if anybody is new listening or watching tonight, I would encourage you to check out the episode on boundaries. But yeah, I would say just for all intents and purposes, we're not going to be talking about being, we're not talking about instances where you, how do I want to say this? Like where you never, like there are times where you should speak up, right? Like don't be a doormat, but we're not talking about those times. We're talking about just self-control on a regular basis. So
yes,
I kind of have a story that goes along with this. I don't know that it's exactly like appropriate if somebody's eating. So maybe if you're eating, you might want to pause the show and come back later. But so a couple years ago now, I had two very young kids, and they were both under the age of, geez, I think they were both under 3 at the time that I'm thinking of. So I have one, I mean, they're both like, I have one that's into everything. The other one was like crawling everywhere. And Jeff came in from outside and like there was just kind of like a smell. And then he was like walking around the house with his shoes on. And all of a sudden he's just like, ah, and I'm like, what is wrong? And he's like, there's dog poop like all over my shoes. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? So we look around, he's tracked it all over the place. Like oh, anybody with small children, especially ones that are crawling, like I was just like, I cannot even, like I'm like sanitizing everything. I'm freaking out. Like just don't touch anything, kids. You know, it just was a big mess. So, and that took forever, by the way. Like that was not a fun night. But anyways, so he had figured out that someone had let their dog, like someone let their dog go to the bathroom in our yard. We didn't see it. And when he was like wheeling the trash can, he like walked through it and wheeled like the entire trash can. So it just like was all over, it just was everywhere, like garage, trash can everywhere. Anyways, so I was very upset about that. And a couple of days later, my mom was, she was visiting. And I love you, Mom, because I know you're probably listening to this. So she was visiting, and I happened to look out and I saw this lady letting her dog go to the bathroom in my front yard. And like no bag, no nothing. And I was just like, are you kidding me? So I'm like, it's the dog poop lady. And my mom was just like, oh, like you need to go out there. You need to tell her exactly what you're feeling, you know, yell at her, all this stuff. My mom, God bless her. I think she was just very mama bear over me and knew the stress that I had dealt with and everything. But she was just like, you know, you need to go out there and give this lady like what for. And I was just like, I don't know why, because I was upset, but I just was like, I'm not going to do that. And it was a totally God thing, because I opened up the door and I was just like, I I mean, like, what do I say? I'm just like, hi, like, is everything okay? I noticed, um, your dog is going to the bathroom in my yard, like, and, and she was just like, I'm so sorry, like, my dog is just really constipated. I'm not even kidding you. My dog is really constipated, so whenever it goes, I just need to stop and let it go. And I was just like, no problem. Like, I totally understand. Just like, wait right there. So I was like, I'll get you a bag, right? So that you can clean it up. So I walk, like, I shut the door, I go to get the bag, and I happen to notice this can of like pumpkin puree, which apparently is really, I don't even know how I knew this at the time, but it's really good for dogs that can't go. So not only do I not tell her off, but I walk out there with the can of pumpkin puree and the bag. And I'm like, here you go. Like, try mixing this with your dog's food. I'm sure it'll help with the constipation. And here's a bag for your cleanup. And just thank you and have a nice day. And she was just like, oh, thank you so much, and whatever. But then I walked back inside and my mom was like really surprised that I did that. But I feel, and I'm not trying to make myself like a good example at all, but I feel like that was an instance where it really paid to have self-control because I just I don't know. I
Yeah,
made a little friend that day and I didn't find dog poop in my yard after that. So I
that's
don't know.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that is a great example because it's so easy for us to just jump into this place where we get emotional and we get angry and we just want to like stay there. And so for you to like stop in the moment and be aware of that, I think that's a big key within self-control is awareness of what your behavior is and what you really want to display.
Mhm.
Because if we are not even aware of what our behavior is and how it looks to other people, we're not going to know like that we're doing it differently than we actually want ourselves to be viewed and how we want to show God's love to other people through our actions. So I think just being aware of it, and I love that in the moment you were aware enough to be like, okay, I'm gonna stop. Like I don't have to get angry right now. I can approach this in a different way and go out and talk to her in a much better way. And in some ways, maybe you helped her dog. So
I mean, I like to think so. It was such a bizarre like circumstance, but you know what? Like, I mean, that it did not lead to an opportunity where I could share my faith, but I mean, just imagine, down the road, if another situation comes up and there's another example to show self-control and like maybe she could have said like you don't really seem to get angry or like what's different or I don't know, just I feel like the harder we try to live separately from what the culture is telling us to do that we know is wrong and the more self-control we exhibit, I just feel like that really can be a positive light for people, and that can make people take notice and just at like that's an opportunity. I feel like it's an opportunity to be a good witness and just to be able to share your faith with someone.
yes, it is. And in this world today, with so many emotionally, so many things in our news and politics and all of these things that are causing us to feel very emotionally charged.
Hmm.
In a world like that, to see someone that has a lot of self-control, regardless of how they feel about a subject and whatnot, it does stand out. It does show that that person, there's something different about them. I don't know what it is, but there's something different about them. And so, in a way, it can be a light to others, even if we're not able to share our faith. They're like, wait, hold on, there's something different here. This is not a normal response in our society. So that's a huge thing. I think that we need to be aware of as Christians is how we're reacting and
Hmm.
what it is that we want to display in this world. How do you want people to view you? And if we can understand that and we know what we want people to see from us, then we can stand out. We can look different than other people. So in some ways it may minister to others.
So, so we've talked a little bit about what culture tries to throw at us and how self-control is not actually a good thing, right? But God's word is, to me, it's very clear. It's all sprinkled all throughout Proverbs. They talk about self-control. Proverbs 17:27 is up on the screen right now. There's also a verse in Galatians, which I'm pretty sure most people would be familiar with, but just in case they're not, it's Galatians 5:22. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, and self-control." So there's definitely a reason. It's a fruit of the Spirit. I mean, God values it highly, and it's really interesting if you read Galatians, just the few previous verses, it talks about the works of the flesh. And there's a whole bunch in there that talk about works of the flesh, outbursts of anger, let's see, dissensions, hatreds, promiscuity, all these things that our culture really just tries to elevate as wonderful things. In God's word, they're really in God's eyes, they're not good.
Right. And I love this in Proverbs. I love Proverbs in general. There's so much knowledge and wisdom in Proverbs. But in this one, in Proverbs 17:27, it says, "The intelligent person restrains his words, and one who keeps a cool head is a man of understanding." So, like we had said before, when we use self control, we do look different than
Mhm.
others. And I think this kind of explains that in a lot of ways. People see that someone that can keep a cool head is someone that kind of knows what they're talking about because they've thought about things and they've pondered on things before they respond. And so it's a better response and not as much emotional as it is a a response that took thought and is more rational.
Yes. And actually, I just thought of a quote. It was up on our church sign the other day. It said, I thought this was so great. Be sure to taste your words before you spit them out.
Mm,
I was
that's
like,
good.
that's good. I don't know who said it, but I really like it.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's something that happens inside of our brain. So, what's going on inside of our brain when we have emotions and we're feeling like kind of stressed with those emotions? We're in a part of the brain that's not logical thinking. So, in order to move to the logical thinking side of the brain, we have to stop the all of the emotional thinking that we're doing in that moment and kind of pause that. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can't feel whatever you're feeling,
Right.
because whatever situation it is, obviously everybody has their own feelings to go along with whatever is happening. But when we're in that side of the brain, we cannot use logical thinking. We have to remove ourselves from that side of the brain and that thought process and move it to logical thinking. So, a lot of the times when we feel emotionally charged and just ready to burst with however we're feeling, and usually that's not a good time to make a decision because we're
Right.
not in that logical thinking side of our brain. So, just taking a deep breath can even help in those situations because it kind of resets your body. It gives you a little bit more oxygen, gets your blood flowing, and it can pause your thinking for a second. Okay, let's just think about taking a breath. I'm using a different part of my brain if I have to stop and be like, okay, I need to take a breath. And then we can switch and say, let's look at this a little rationally, a little bit more logically. And we still can have the feelings, like I said, but are we acting upon, like, are we making a decision within those feelings of how we act next versus can we think about it logically and pause and really reflect on the situation and then decide our actions from there, which are not an action decided with emotion. When we decide things with emotion, it's not something that is usually a very good decision.
Right.
It's not a very thought out decision. It's a very quick decision. So that's just some things that are kind of going on internally for you to really think about, and just tangibly you can just take a breath, just calm yourself for a second, and then think about the situation before you respond. So taste your words, think about what those are before you spit them out.
Right.
I love that quote. That's awesome. I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up.
I love that quote too. I think something else that can help with this, because I know you said like take a breath, think about what you're about to say. But I also feel like even just in that breath, like sometimes I will just have to say like a quick prayer, like,
Mm.
Lord, help me to be sweet with my speech, or, like set a guard. I pray this a lot. Set a guard over my mouth so that I'm not harsh
Mm.
with anyone, or set a guard over my mouth so that I'm not harsh with so and so, or So I think saying a quick prayer could be good too.
Yes. I often will say a prayer like, put the words in my mouth that you want me to respond with right now. How can I respond in a godly way? And just saying that or just having that time in prayer, like you said, can just help to reset ourselves and remind ourselves, hey, like we are wanting to display a godly behavior here. Just because the situation makes us upset or we're having issues with what's going on does not mean that we have to respond in the same way that maybe someone else is responding in the situation that's upsetting us in the first place.
Right.
We can take a moment and respond in a very godly way, but still be able to respond. And we've talked about this in past shows, so go check out our other shows as well. But we can still respond and be able to speak our truth and talk about how we feel in a godly way. It doesn't mean that we just have to forget about how we feel or forget about the situation and just be like, paste a smile on our face and move
Right.
on. We can still respond in a godly way, but be able to navigate the situation better if we're not in that emotional decision making
Yes.
space.
Yes. Yes. And I would also say too that sometimes when I'm in a situation and I don't know if it's like if someone's just making me angry or someone's making me upset and I get really emotional and I feel like I'm going to lose my self-control. I don't know why, but or if anybody else out there is like this, but I think it's almost important to stop making yourself I hesitate to say this, but stop feeling sorry for yourself. Like, stop
Mm.
making yourself like in the role of a victim for whatever's making you mad. And obviously, I don't mean like abuse situations. I'm not talking about that, but like the dog poop example, right? Like, all I could think about was, this lady like doesn't even care that I spent all this time like sanitizing, and she doesn't care that I have two small kids. I was just so mad, and it was all about how she inconvenienced me, how and I just felt so justified in feeling angry,
Mm.
and so I think that you had mentioned once, and I love this, that we have to picture people with like spiritual wounds. And I love that picture because, you know, she justified in not cleaning up after her dog? Probably not, right? But at least, you know, if you stop feeling sorry for yourself and focusing on how it's affecting you in a negative way, it can at least give you just a few minutes to try to put yourself in the other person's shoes for whatever
Hmm.
situation you're in. And this, I feel like this goes with anything. Like if somebody's nasty to you on social media, or if somebody, um, I mean, I don't know. Can you think of any, can you think of any
Yeah,
examples?
it's we have a world where there's so many times that, like say we're in traffic and somebody cuts us off in traffic. Maybe they didn't see our car. I mean, there's times
Right.
that I will cut in front of someone, not intentionally, and I look back and I'm like, oh, they are really close to my bumper. I had no idea they were there. And I tried to look for a car. So does it mean that they intentionally cut you off? Maybe they did. Either way, whether they did or not, we can't just jump to the conclusion that they did cut me off intentionally. And then
Right.
that kind of, I mean, a lot of the times that ruins someone's day when they feel angry because someone did something to them that was not great. And so that's just a small example of how we can take a step back and look at the situation and say, well, one, this person may not have cut me off on purpose. But
Right.
let's say that they did cut me off on purpose. Well, if I start shaking my fist at them in the car, or I get emotional about it, it makes my day not that great. And if I take a step back and I think about it, maybe that person has just lost someone to cancer and they're not paying attention to traffic.
Yep.
Maybe they just went through, I don't know, like a really hard breakup with their fiance that they've been planning a wedding with for a couple of years. Maybe they just lost a child.
Yeah.
And who knows what their life was like? Maybe their entire life they never felt that anybody loved them. Or they've just had a really hard time with their kids, in and out of jail, or whatever it is that's going on in their life. They could have had any number of things happen prior to this experience. And does that mean that it was okay for them to cut you off intentionally in traffic? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. But
Right.
can we extend a little bit of a grace in that situation, and assume that, hey, maybe they were just having a bad day, and we all have bad days. We just talked about that in a previous episode as well, when we talked about anger with other people. But maybe they were having a bad day, and just extend a little grace.
Yeah. What is the worst that it's going to do for you? You're
Mhm.
going to extend grace and respond in a loving way to someone and be Christ-like
Mhm.
rather than assert your rights or whatever else, which is selfish and fleshly.
Mhm. And the thing is when we do that, when we get in that stance of, well, I'm justified in feeling this way, what is our typical behavior when that happens? We will typically feel very upset because we're like, I'm angry, I'm justified. And the more that we think about being justified because this person did this wrong to us, the more angry we get, the more upset our day is going to become. And a lot of the times we will get on the phone, or we will
Yes.
we will talk to our neighbor next door or a friend or the next person that we see and be
Or
like,
get on social media, post
yeah,
about it.
and be like, can you believe that this person did A, B, C, and D to me? And like, I didn't deserve that at all. Well, honestly, now we have gotten into not only sitting with our anger and having a bad day because of it, but now we have turned to gossiping about someone else that we don't know what has gone on in their life and why they did what they did to us
Right.
and what spiritual wounds they might be walking around with. Again, it doesn't justify their behavior, but look at our behavior after the fact.
Yeah, because now you're pulling other people in with you. So
Mm-hmm.
let's get Susie mad. Let's get Sharon mad. Like, come on, guys.
It's
Just
it just fuels the anger, and it spreads it to other people, and now they might feel upset about their day and be a little bit more on edge, and then maybe they cut somebody off in traffic, or maybe they have somebody else cut them off in traffic, and then they're even more mad.
mhm.
So they've it's it's sharing the anger, and we're gossiping, and we're staying angry, and we're having a worse day, when it could have all been stopped if we had just been like, I'm going to try to respond in a godly way now, and assume that this person has a major spiritual wound that they need help with. And it's not easy to think in that way, but if we practice that,
Mhm.
it will be a whole lot easier.
Yes. Yes,
In
for sure.
in our brain, if we look at the brain and what its function is, when we have a thought pattern of getting angry and getting emotional and staying in that place like we talked about, it grows that thought pattern. So then in our brain, it's going to robotically almost go there every single time we have something like that happen.
Yep. Default
And
mode.
and so our body is like, half the time when we have an emotional thing happen to us and we get angry like that in the moment, we're like, why am I so upset over this? Like sometimes I'll
Mhm.
find myself doing that. I'm like, how did I get so upset over this? Because we're not being as aware of our thought life and our thought patterns, and what are we growing inside of our head? Like, what thought patterns are we growing? What I want to do and what my values are with my relationship with God and what he says that we should do for myself is I want to grow godly thought patterns strong.
Mhm.
I want those to be my go-to robotic thought patterns rather than being in a place where I almost always default to this pattern, because if we're tired, if we're stressed out, if we are just not 100% that day because we didn't get as much sleep or whatever it is, then our body's just going to default. It's going to
Mhm.
always default. And I want my default to be the stronger pattern of thought that's a
Right.
godly one,
Right.
not not the negative one that makes my day crappy.
Right. And I don't know if you've noticed a difference too, but there's times when I have had like a negative default. And like you say, like, I'm just like, why am I even so upset about this? Because I've just been getting upset, haven't had self control, and, haven't been practicing it. And I feel like it really drags my family down. I feel like it drags my kids down. But when I catch myself and then I try really hard to exhibit self control and just be careful with my words and speak life and speak love, like the whole atmosphere just seems to shift and everybody just seems like happier, right? So something else that I wanted to say about self-control, this has helped me a lot, is to recognize if I am having an off day or I'm upset or frustrated, whatever, just to not say anything. Like there are times where my kids really frustrate me or my husband frustrates me and I just want to blow up, but just, taking a deep breath and just staying silent. Like
Mm-hmm.
I won't even say a word. A lot of times I will go upstairs and I will just pray straight to God. Like I won't call my friends or,
Mm-hmm.
whoever and try to get everybody on my side. I'll just say, Lord, I am so angry right now because, so and so just did this. And I just feel like it was really unfair. And I will just pour out my heart to Him. And a lot of times, you know, I, I don't know why it helps so much, but I feel like God hears. I feel like He understands. I feel like since I'm feeling those emotions, He's a safe person to go to with that because he gets it. And I feel like I'm almost blessed because I chose that route, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. And then a lot of times I'm just, if there's something that comes to mind as I'm praying that I do need to address, like maybe one of my kids was sassy or something, then I can calmly say, you know what, that really upset me earlier. When you were sassy with me, that's not how we talk to mom, and address it at a later date when I'm calmer and I'm not gonna like bite their head off, right?
Right. And I think that's an interesting point that you bring up because going to God, it is a safe place. And we know that God's not going to jump on the bandwagon with us and be like, I know that was horrible of that person to do that. And, because that just fuels the flame. And so calling that friend that is going to be on your side is not probably the best route to go in a situation where you're trying to calm down.
Right.
So that's awesome that you brought that up because going to God, it helps us process what we're feeling so we can be in that place of not focusing and acting in that emotional state and looking at it a little bit more logically and like calmer when we respond. And it is okay to not say anything because there's that saying that says, it's an old saying that says if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. And that's so true. If you cannot have self-control in that moment and you feel emotional in that moment, take that time to step away and
Hmm.
pray and talk to God. Or if you do have a friend that's very supportive and godly and is able to respond to you and you need to talk to them, pray about it. And then if you still feel like you need to talk that out, call that friend, but make sure it's a
Yes.
friend that knows how to respond in those situations and not just going to jump on board with whatever is going on and it's going to look at it in a very rational and godly stance.
Right. Right. Like case in point, like I've called you a couple of times about issues I might have had with like Jeff. And instead of just jumping to my side immediately, you might say, well, like, you know, how do you think Jeff is feeling about this? Or, is something going on with Jeff? And you just always try to bring the other person's perspective into it. So I really appreciate that about you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love that about our friendship because I can do that with you as well. And so if you don't have someone like that, I encourage you to find a friendship where you can have that within the friendship because it's such a support to have someone on the other end of the line that is going to be very straightforward with you. And they're going
Right.
to call you out if you need to be called out.
Yes.
Those are the people in my life that I love the most because they care about me the most. They're not there to give you a politically correct answer or the answer that you want to hear.
Right.
They're there to support you in whatever way that you need support. And what I need in a moment like that, where I'm angry and I may not be looking at it from the other person's perspective, is for someone to calm me down and be like, so let's try to look at this from the other angle. Like, what do you think this other person is thinking about? And maybe the other person is in the wrong, but it's always good to still step away and look at the whole situation before we respond in a very emotional way.
Right.
So, just to have that person in your life, if you don't have someone like that, I encourage you to seek out and search for a friendship like that because it's so needed and it's really awesome because it not only grows you as a person, but it for my friendship with you, I feel like I grow closer to God all the time because of the friendship and because of how close we are and like just the direction that we point each other in if we do have an issue that we need to talk about over the phone.
Yes. Well, thank you. And I feel like it's like, I'm not sure if it's a biblical saying, but the iron sharpening iron.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
if somebody is listening and they don't have a friendship like that and they want one, I would just like to encourage you. I mean, God really wants you to have a friendship like that. Like
Yeah.
God designed us for community. So pray and ask God to bring a friend like that into your life. He will definitely answer that prayer. It might not be on your timetable, but he will answer that prayer. He has been very faithful to me when I've had various moves just to provide friends for me that could help me out. And I'm very thankful for all of those friends. So
Yes, and he did exactly that for me. In our first episode, I shared about my story with Mel and how we met. And I prayed for her. My family and I prayed together before I moved for someone that God would send into my life that would be a godly friend. And you were specifically the answer to prayer. And it's so funny, like how specific like we prayed and how it turned out. God just was like, well, I created her for this purpose. So it's awesome, but God will do that. He will answer those prayers. So reach out to him when you're feeling that way, like angry, upset, whatever it is that you feel like you're losing your self-control. And I think there's a lot of other areas of self-control that we have not even touched on, which would be
right.
awesome for like another show. So maybe in the
Yes.
future we will have other shows. But if you're
Yes.
feeling that way in any way, shape, or form that you're losing your self-control, run to God, talk to him about it, and then go to that friend if you have one. And if you don't have one, keep praying to God and he will send them into your life, I promise.
For sure. For sure.
Well, I think this is a good place to end the show for tonight. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to close you out in prayer, and then I'll give you a few things before we leave.
Right. Heavenly Father God, thank you so much for this day. Just thank you for everybody who's listening, Lord. I would just like to pray, God, that the people who are listening would first and foremost just go to your word and seek out what you have to say about self-control. I pray that they would commit whatever verse or 2 or 3 that they feel speaks to their heart about self-control. I pray that they would commit that to memory and just try to develop new thought patterns and new thought processes and just a new default mode, Lord, of just really exercising self-control and just choosing self-control over fleshly responses. Lord, I just pray that if anybody is or is aware of a time when maybe they have not had self-control towards a loved one or a friend, that they would just be quick to just go confess and ask forgiveness, even if they weren't necessarily in the wrong, but they still acted fleshly. I just pray that they would just take the time to go try and reconcile with that friend or family member and just confess their lack of self-control and just their wish to make amends, Lord, and be reconciled. And I just pray that you would bring reconciliation and healing to any relationships that a lack of self-control has just messed with, Lord. And finally, Lord, I just want to pray for anyone out there who might just be yearning and sad, or maybe might feel lonely because they feel like they don't have a friend that could hold them accountable, or they just don't feel like they have a friend that they could share things with. Lord, you are our ultimate friend. Like, Lord, just everything. Like, you're everything for us. So I just pray that they would realize that they can go to you, Lord, with whatever's on their heart. And I do pray that you would stand in that gap for them, Lord, while they're waiting for the friend that you will bring them, Lord. And I just pray that they would be encouraged, that you would bring them a godly friend. And and I just pray that you would be quick to answer that prayer for them, Lord, so that they could have someone not only in heaven but also on earth that can help hold them accountable, and that they could just talk to and just just have have a close safe relationship with, Lord. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for being here. We are here every week having a new episode out. So check out all of our old episodes if this is your first week here. And thank you again for coming. If you have anything that you would like to have us think about talking on the show about, if you have a question for us or something like that, you can do that by emailing us at godstruthintodaysworld@gmail.com. And we would love to look at those questions and see if it's something that God calls us to put on the show and answer for you. So I hope you have a great week, and God bless everyone.
Take care.